Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome everybody. My name is Hamid Khan with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and welcome to our Tuesday night webinar. This is the fourth Tuesday of the month, so this is the time that we have committed to our fight around the national security police state and data-driven policing and how those programs are impacting our lives, our communities, our neighborhoods. Um, and this is today is part 44 of this Know Your Rights webinar series. We started back in March of last year in 2020 in lieu of our in-person meetings, which were happening every week, every Tuesday of the month at our home in Skid Row at Los Angeles Community Action Network. And hopefully, once this passes, hopefully it shall, we would circle back and be meeting in person again. But up until then, how do we make the best use of this virtual space? How do we keep on connecting? How do we keep on building? How do we keep on sharing? How do we keep on building our power? And because the fights are many, and obviously one of the things that we are also watching is that for us in some of the spaces, and we try to be present in many spaces out on the street and other places, but that have gone virtual, that how, like folks like the police commission and others are taking advantage of that too. So can't wait to get back into in-person action. We have a full meeting today, and it's more of a working meeting where we're going to be reviewing a bunch of stuff around where our fight is around facial recognition technology, and then what is the update on our data-driven policing, give you a quick feedback on where the data-informed community-focused policing handbook. And also, we've been talking about laser zones and anchor points and community policing and a whole bunch of things. But we also want to dedicate some time today on a couple of other pieces too, towards the latter 40 or so minutes of our meeting. One that with our partners, Free Radicals, we've been working, who are very deeply involved with us in our fight against predictive policing and dismantling of Predpol. We've been building with them since June or July around the defund surveillance, defunding LAPD, but specifically looking at surveillance and the technology side of LAPD. And we wanted to present a draft of a set of demands to today at this meeting, and just to get feedback from folks. And then after that, we'll also be hearing from one of our core members and partners, Baby Anarchist, on the zine that we have drafted on our principles and values, and principles that we had collectively drafted about 4 years ago. So 4 years later, we did manage to get a zine together. So here we are. But to get it all started real quickly, folks may have noticed that when they chimed in that they were muted. That's not out of, well, it's kind of intentional, but not really, because we have been Zoom bombed. So please make use of the raise your hand function, and also or send a message in chat. The chat also, we're kind of holding off on host only, because we've been Zoom bombed through chat as well. But as we move along, we'll definitely circle back and open up the mics for everybody, and chat as well. But let's see how it goes. So in the meantime, I am going to pass on the mic over to Shakir Rahman, who's going to give us an update on where our fight is on facial recognition. And just to let folks know that we are being recorded, and the recording of this webinar, part 44, is going to be on the website by the end of this week. So Shakir, on to you.
Yeah, thanks, Hamid. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just want to give an update on where, you know what, I have this thing that's making, okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. I have a humidifier that was bubbling and I hadn't realized how noisy it was. Yeah, to give an update on our kind of the ongoing fight against LAPD's use of facial recognition, and kind of use of facial recognition, not just by the police, but our effort to kind of end this all use of this technology, treating it like kind of other dangerous weapons that we don't just kind of restrict police use of, but kind of try to outlaw and banish from society. So the latest in that is that the police commission last month announced that LAPD that they'd be considering or weighing in on an LAPD proposed policy regulating their use of facial recognition. That policy proposal came after the LA Times reported in the fall that the police department had been using this facial recognition database that's hosted by LA County. It's hosted by the Sheriff's Department called called LACRIS, LA County, I don't know, imaging something. And that came after, for years, LAPD have been denying that they use facial recognition technology. They had, denied our PRA requests asking for more information about it. They told reporters we don't use it. The LA Times broke that no, in fact, they'd been using it. They've been using the system and in fact had accessed it 30,000 times this year and had used it even for images from the protests this summer. So in response to that, LAPD then decided to come up with a policy regulating their use of that system. So we, along with our partners, LA CAN, BLM-LA, and White People for Black Lives, wrote created this open letter demanding that the police commission reject this policy, that the police commission investigate kind of past use of LAPD facial recognition and all the harm from that, and that the police commission impose a ban on LAPD use of facial recognition. So the police commission, we wrote that letter. Over 70 organizations from across the city and some national organizations too signed on, joined those demands. The police commission created an email address to receive public comment on it. They received like almost 1,000 emails, something like it was like 900 something opposing the policy and kind of echoing our demands for a ban, and something like 14 in support of it. There were a lot of public comments also opposing it. After that happened, so the police commission, heard all of that, and then they do what they do, which is they kind of rubber stamp the LAPD's policies. The police commissioners, there were 4 of them present that day. They kind of tried to, I would say, mangle the kind of concerns that people were raising as oh yeah, it looks like some of the concerns are about whether this technology is going to be tracking people in real time. It doesn't do that, right? And the police were like, no, okay, it doesn't do that. Or like, are there any oversight mechanisms on it? And throwing the police chief all these softball kind of questions. And so he was able to say, no, yeah, there's nothing like that. Of course, those weren't the demands that the people were making. Those weren't the concerns that we were raising. But the police commission has this job of kind of taking the community's concerns, making them into something else that then the police can say, oh yeah, okay, we considered input. So the police commission voted to approve the policy. So now LAPD has this kind of regulatory policy. It's like an internal policy saying when officers can use it, when they can't, what kind of documentation they have to fill out. And that, helps kind of make their use of this technology, it normalizes it and creates, a mechanism for them to do that. So that obviously isn't the end of our fight. In fact, it's the beginning. And, in many ways, we wanted to make this demand as fully as possible to the police commission, but the police commission, what they do is they approve of these things. So what we're now kind of eyeing is having to impose external from the police department, because the police commission is within the police department, and trying to think about ways to take that power away from LAPD through maybe a legislative ban or advocating to dismantle the county system, but just recognizing that these like internal oversight bodies don't do shit. And so what we really need to do is to actually take that power away from them and to ban or dismantle and abolish these technologies. So that's kind of the next phase of our fight. And we're, we have a broad coalition that signed on to that letter. So we'll be kind of working with all of everyone who called for that ban to think of how to enact it through other means.
Awesome. Thank you, Shakir. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts, any feedback? Anybody who was there at that police commission meeting? Anybody likes facial recognition? I think it was such a mockery of public process because because it was so I didn't even forget the numbers. The total emails they got, public comments, were 943, and out of which 931, which is 98.7%, opposed it, and only 12 approved of that. So, and they said, well, there's they'll follow up, and just they'll build trust with the people. Question from Steve: did the press do want to follow up? Any follow up? Yeah, they did put a report out the next day on the vote count, and also on what the people's sentiments are. And I think what's also very telling is that this is in light of where the whole world is discrediting facial recognition technology, and there's a whole lot of bans that are going on all around the country too. But that's why the fight continues, and we'll keep on building it up, and keep on updating folks, because it's about all of us, and we all need to be in it. So, and with that, I'm gonna pass it on to Tiff, who was gonna give us an update on a quick overview of what our current fight around data-driven policing is, and how it's rooted in the handbook that they released, and a little bit of background on that. So, Tiff, moving on to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Hamid. And are you able to share that presentation that I sent to you? Hi, everyone. I'm Tiff, they, them pronouns. Hey, Sophie. And yeah, while Hamid is pulling that up, thank you so much. So now we're going to talk about what LAPD launched last year. So in April of 2020, what they launched was their most recent iteration of data-driven policing, which is what this Tuesday night meeting is, that meets every fourth Thursday of the month, is fighting against. And this is their most recent iteration of it. We're going to be talking about the handbook. This is what folks are working on right now, is kind of looking through this handbook that was issued last year, going through the different ways that it works and that folks are being targeted, and kind of taking it apart to understand it better. So that's something that folks are working on, and that we're going to be reporting back on. But first, we're going to be talking a little bit more. And Hamid, if you could go to the next slide, please.
I'm trying to see how to do that. I'm sorry. Oh, there you go. Oh, no, wait.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I'm going to be so excited when I can have a laptop that I can do this myself. Okay, great. So that's a picture of the handbook. There it is. And then actually we can move on right to the next slide, because we're going to talk about, so how did we get here? How did we get to this version that we're looking at and that we're fighting against right now in 2020 and in 2021? So as folks know, data-driven policing in some form has been a part of LAPD for numerous decades. We're not going to go too far back in time, but I did want to just call out some significant markers here. A big marker, of course, in any discussion about data-driven policing is 2004, and this is when the information sharing environment came into existence. Hamid can speak to this much better than I can, but I'll just say that this was created as a result of 9/11 in 2001. So that by 2004, federal and state agencies and police departments had really started investing and creating the infrastructure by which they could be gathering and sharing data on a much more extreme, much more high level. And yeah, gathering that information, sharing it across agencies, all under the guise, of course, of national security. So that happened in 2004. As far as here in LA, we had Bill Bratton. He was chief of police in 2003, and then he went until 2009. And what Bratton was really known for was his data-driven approach to policing. And this actually developed while he was here with LAPD. It developed further in response to calls from folks about racial justice regarding policing, rightfully calling out the police as being racist. And Bratton recognized during that time, as folks were calling out the inequity and the racism of policing, that this was an opportunity for police and for his specific data-driven programs, because he was already interested in that. He had been already very invested in gathering data and using that for policing and for targeting communities and you know, as justification as to why police should be in certain areas. But he kind of recognized that moment as, okay, well, now we can also be, people are asking for a non-racialized approach to policing. That's what data-driven policing is. We're gonna position it as being not racist, but data-driven. And what we saw under Bratton is we see a lot of the elements starting to be put into place of data-driven policing and of LAPD's architecture of surveillance that we see today and that are still being used in data-informed, community-focused policing. So it was Bratton that brought in CompStat. This was a crime reporting system that LAPD relies on now for crime statistics. He brought in Palantir. That was a very, it's obviously still used today. It's a very powerful data analysis platform that pulls together information very easily from a lot of different databases and gives cops like a place to kind of look for patterns and to do these analyses that they were unable to do before. He brought in Racer. He established Racer pretty early on. Those are regional area crime centers. So those were essentially like these little spy centers that we sometimes talk about. This is kind of the most recent or the most early iteration of those. Those did use facial recognition analysis. He also started CSOCs. Those started as early as 2003. Those are the Community Safety Operations Center that still operate today and are a part of the handbook that we're dissecting now in 2021. And these again are essentially data analysis centers or spy centers. He brought in CCTVs. He installed those in, you know, the housing areas, the housing complexes, smart cars using facial recognition. He accelerated, like data was already being gathered from folks during stops. People were already being stopped by police a lot, but it accelerated to a great amount under Bratton. And data was gathered from folks during those stops in the form of field interview or FI cards, which is when police would fill out this little form about who are we stopping, who are you with, what is your name, and then they would like put in other personal information about you, including if you were a gang member, if they thought you were a gang member, that kind of information. And these are used very heavily today to track people. So that was something that was used under Bratton. He implemented SARs, which are these suspicious activity reports, whereby folks could be reported by other community members, usually white community members, who thought that a person seemed suspicious to them for some reason, and that they would report this to police, and that information on that person and their activity and their location would be filed by police and kept in a database. He implemented iWatch, which is the See Something, Say Something program. So all of these things were brought in by Bratton. And he also implemented broken windows policing, which is like the policing of this idea of policing that I'm sure folks are familiar with. It's the concept of policing very small crimes, policing misdemeanors, with the belief that you have to keep an orderly environment or else it's just going to spiral out of control, chaos will ensue, all of these kinds of things. And that is that's kind of a part and parcel with data-driven policing. because while people are being surveilled in communities in specific locations that are being deemed more criminal and high crime, LAPD is kind of, while they're watching that area, they're also looking for reasons to issue citations and looking for reasons to police folks and to stop folks. And so often it would be this broken windows policing, misdemeanors would be a reason for folks to do that, or for police to do that. And as he's building this architecture of surveillance and of police and community reporting, he was also enlisting tech companies and academia to further legitimize and to help promote and launch these policing programs. So this is all the stuff that kind of Bratton is putting together. Okay, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, let's see. And then I'm also going to pause and see if Hamid, if you want to add anything at this point, because I'm sure I'm missing some things or maybe misspeaking on some things, and you know a lot of this history as well. So
No,
also pause maybe.
Just one quick thing I want to add is where the broken windows policing was launched in Skid Row in 2005, and ended up in massive displacement and banishment of unhoused people. That's one of the biggest fights that Los Angeles Community Action Network has been undertook, and it really was what we see, a very violent and a direct and an overt policing of poverty and homelessness. And so in a sense where within the first 2 years, close to over 30,000 tickets just for quality of life, for jaywalking, for urinating in public, for even throwing ash on the ground, were issued to people. And the idea was to make people's lives so miserable and to issue these tickets, where these tickets, when you're on GR and you're getting under $250 a month, and you're getting general relief, and you have no place to go, and the tickets cost over $100. So that adds. And of course, I mean, there's much to it, but yeah, I mean, Bratton was one of the primary architects of where we are today. Thank you, too.
Thanks so much. Okay, so yes, we had Bratton in 2008, and he was just doing all of the things that we were speaking about, of course. Excuse me. And by 2008, I believe, is when Palantir was acquired, and 2008 is also when, I believe, because it was definitely Bratton that started Operation Laser, which was not implemented until 2011, but it kind of was in the works under Bratton. He was the one that was looking at Palantir and thinking about, okay, how can we be using this more specifically in our communities? He was working with Justice Security Strategies, which was a longtime partner of LAPD, and Justice Security Strategies, specifically Craig Uchida, was the one who designed Operation Laser, and who was in charge of then implementing it, or kind of, well, he didn't implement it, the LAPD implemented it, but he kind of monitored it and reported on it. So Bratton did that, and then 2009, December, Charlie Beck comes in as police. He continues smart policing that was started by Bratton. He kind of continues that with Operation Laser and with Predpol, which wasn't implemented, I believe, until 2012. And they had this goal of, okay, like, it was essentially implemented for the next 9 years under Beck, with the goal of 100% that Operation Laser would be used by all divisions by 2020. And when we say smart policing, by the way, like all of these terms that sound so similar, so smart policing, the Smart Policing Initiative, this was the kind of umbrella descriptor of policing tactics that the Bureau of Justice Assistance was looking for police agencies to be engaging with, and they were kind of offering grants and money for agencies that were willing to experiment with programs. So they were saying, okay, we're offering this grant money for smart policing, submit your proposals and we will give you grant money for this. And that was like the Smart Policing Initiative. And that was how LAPD got their funding to implement this experiment of Operation Laser in LA's communities. And okay, and if we could go to the next slide, please. And we will take a moment here to just review what is Operation Laser. And I know this is something that folks may be very familiar with. But I think it's also important that we are familiar with this program, not only because, you know, as we know, elements of this program are still continuing today, perhaps just under another name, but also that we are still in harms, the very real harms of this program and the way that it was launched against folks in the community. So it's really important that we're familiar with it and how it works. And we'll go through this and then I'll just pause for any questions as well. So this is just a part of the awesome pamphlet that was designed by Peter, one of our coalition members. It's not the full thing, but I thought I would just start with this picture. So Operation Laser, for Operation Laser, LAPD would use crime data. So they basically use crime reports from the past X number of years, like 5 years or so, to designate certain areas as laser zones. These areas that were designated laser zones by LAPD based on crime reports were then more aggressively patrolled and watched. They were designated as high crime. They were able to legitimize adding surveillance to these areas, adding patrols. People were deemed suspicious for simply being in a laser zone, and it could be grounds for a person being pulled over. Within these laser zones, there were further locations identified, such as like intersections or residences, and these were called anchor points. They were called anchor points because they were like supposedly associated with being an anchor for crime. And so these anchor points within laser zones were also identified for increased surveillance. People were also identified under Operation Laser. They were identified for additional surveillance and being watched and being followed and being policed. And what would happen here with the offender-based side of Operation Laser is that LAPD analysts in each area or each division would gather information on folks in the area, folks in the community, and they would talk to the cops in that area and to supervisors, and they would say, okay, who are your high crime offenders in this area? Or who are your folks to watch out for? And they would generate a list of names. And then the analysts would like look up more information on these folks using Palantir and looking at previous police involvement with folks. And then they would issue, they would call that the workup, and they would do a workup, and then they would issue a chronic offender bulletin for folks that looked like a crime bulletin or a flyer, and it would have person's like information, their address, all the times they've been stopped, all the locations that they'd been stopped and identified, and they would send these out to patrol units. Officers would have this in their car, and different tactics would be used to surveil these folks and to follow them, to find them, to contact them, to harass them, to look for possible opportunities to search or to arrest them. And all of this was with the goal and the assumption that these are high crime areas. These are people who are suspected of being criminal and potential offenders. So we are just going to surveil and we're going to watch and we're going to be ready to police these folks when that happens. And so this is what their predictive policing program was. They said, we're predicting that these people are going to commit crime, or the crimes are going to occur in these areas, and we're going to be ready. And that was the whole program. Which sounds so ridiculous when I say it now, but and then I'll just pause for a second and see if we have any questions on Operation Laser. And again, that ran from 2011 to 2018 is when the chronic offender bulletins were shut down, and then 2019 is when the entire program was shut down by the community. But I'll just pause. Okay, great, thank you. Sorry, and I'm probably taking a really long time, so I should probably speed it up a little bit. Okay, so next is PredPol, and this awesome slide was created by our comrades, the Free Rads, who I know some of these folks are with us now. This is just one of the pages of the flyer that they created, or the zine that they created. So in addition to Operation Laser, police were also using PredPol. I know less about this program, but essentially thanks to this cool pamphlet that we're looking at, I do know a bit about it. PredPol focused on policing specific locations. It was mainly focused on property crime. It did not focus on offenders, well, except that when police would police specific locations, of course, they would go to the location and then they would police anyone in that area. So of course it did affect people as well. It was completely separate from Operation Laser. PredPol was an algorithm. It was also a company. It was the name of a company that still exists. LAPD would essentially give PredPol access to their crime data, and the PredPol algorithm would spit out these boxes, these predictions of where crime is going to next occur. Then officers were told to patrol those boxes whenever they had an opportunity. LAPD used PredPol from 2012 to 2019, when again, that contract, yeah, so in 2019 is when the program was shut down again due to community pressure, although LAPD tells a different story. They say it was just due to funding. Okay. So next, essentially what happened next is that, yeah, the community went through a series of actions. We had kind of been building with folks, sharing information about these programs. Folks in Skid Row had already been, you know, talking about these programs, sharing their experiences of being policed, talking about, you know, how bullshit these programs were and how they were based in pseudoscience. And through a series of strategies, we learned more about the programs. We pushed for answers. We joined with other folks. We joined with folks in the communities that were being policed. Like here in this picture on the left-hand side, this is a picture from an evening that we spent with folks in Boyle Heights. That graphic was created by the Ovarian Psychos, and we kind of went through a bike ride through the community. We stopped at some of the laser zones. We stopped in an area where Jesse Romero, 14-year-old, had been shot by police in a laser zone. Jesse was suspected or labeled by police as being a gang member. We stopped in that spot. We visited some of the other laser zones. And folks in the community kind of shared their experiences of what it is like to live in that community and what their experiences of being policed were. We did a bunch of other actions, and we essentially ended up pushing for the audit of the programs and the shutdown of the programs. And okay, so by 2019, when the programs were shut down, or when Operation Laser was shut down, LAPD at that point was saying that they didn't know what they were going to replace it with, but they had an idea that they would perhaps replace it with something called precision policing. They couldn't really speak clearly about what that was, except that precision policing was something that the NYPD was trying. They wanted to try to be more precise with their policing. And that was the last we heard about precision policing, because by the time they then launched their handbook in 2020, they said, no, forget precision policing. We're actually going to call it data-driven community-focused policing, because we're focusing on the community. And they gave us the handbook, or the guidebook that we're looking at now. And what we see when we look at it and the elements of data-informed community-focused policing is we see a lot of the same things that we've seen before. You can kind of see these side by side. And there are some differences, like for the intelligence centers, instead of just having the CSOCs and RACER, they now have additional intelligence centers. They now have what they call ACCICs, which are little intelligence centers in each area. They've expanded community policing. Instead of having anchor points, they now call them neighborhood engagement areas. So essentially, it's a lot of the same elements, just some relabeling and also some expansions. And Okay, and that is as far as we have gotten with the handbook so far. And I think next we are going to be hearing from the different groups. Again, kind of what we are doing with our team is we are breaking down this handbook. We're looking at the different areas of it. We're looking at offender-based policing, location-based policing, data gathering, and community safety partnerships, and talking about what are we uncovering in those areas, and then what are the ways that we are also going to be sharing this information with folks. So that is it on the handbook.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiff, for that very thorough background and where we are right now. As you can see, that one of the guiding values for the coalition is that not a moment in time, but a continuation of history. That how they just keep on resurfacing the same programs, whether this was Weed and Seed in the late 1980s to just community safety partnerships of 2020. The outcomes remain the same. The names may change, the players may change, the tactical operations pretty much remain the same, and the expected outcomes are the same. So we're going to now just briefly just kind of hear some of the elements of that. And I just want to let folks know that this is all work in progress. So we haven't by no means kind of achieved full sort of just an analysis and all of that. But this is a constant work in progress that is evolved out of these conversations. The folks who are involved in this and supporting this work are also joined this fight out of these meetings as well and signed up to be a part of the data-driven working groups and other pieces as well. So one of the elements briefly we want to talk about is, which is again a work in progress in understanding, is community policing. So I know that Shakir and Ian were going to maybe just to speak about to that a little bit. So go ahead, Shakir, passing it on to you.
Yeah, I joined this group recently. I mean, we've basically been kind of doing an analysis of just the history of the concept of community policing, and trying to kind of put together a primer on where community policing originates, kind of the how it's been pushed over time. One of the big elements of that has been like the grants that Tiff was talking about that come from the federal government, where local police departments can apply for certain money from the Department of Justice. A big source of the kind of drive of community policing in local police departments has been through grant funding made available through the 1994 crime bill. So that was like the crime bill that Joe Biden actually pioneered, and that created this Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services in the Department of Justice that basically distributes money to local police departments to hire officers for that acronym is COPS. So for the COPS program, or for community policing. And the idea behind it is that there aren't enough police to just be walking around on the streets, kind of getting to know people and, being in the community. And so we just need to have the basic idea of community policing is like, if we just, throw more officers in the streets and they get to know people and they kind of embed in the community, then that's an improvement on policing. Of course, I mean, in operation, a couple of things happen. One is those officers are just doing the same stuff that everyone else is doing, that the rest of police are doing, causing the same harm, and they're just police. And then also these programs are kind of take the form of, and they're deliberately kind of modeled after kind of counterinsurgency type of programs and theory. So the idea being, adapted from U.S. battlefields, from the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, in particular, in the last. That's kind of what's really informed the development of community policing in the last couple decades. Of that, the way we're going to make communities safer is by embedding police across everything, and them kind of learning about everything that people are doing, them kind of ingratiating themselves with certain community leaders and community groups and service providers, including a lot of things that, communities might ask for, more resources or more services or whatever. But if that's going to happen, then police are embedded in them, and the police are then kind of, you know, infiltrating communities in that way. They're front for surveillance in that way. So that's kind of that's the way it's been developing over time. And in LA, actually, so this program of community policing that's kind of most in use now is called community safety partnerships. And that initially began as a pilot funded through the HACLA, the Housing Authority, and through funding from that department. So basically, they paid LAPD to come and police public housing complexes under this community safety partnerships program. So it was funded both by HACLA as well as, and this is kind of a trend that that, you know, saw in Tiff's presentation too, of funded by kind of foundations and nonprofits, including the Ballmer Foundation, Steve Ballmer, you know, the real estate developer and owner of the Clippers and Microsoft kind of founder or something. He funded, you know, charitably this policing program in a city that he's also trying to, you know, actively gentrify and you know, is a real estate speculator in. So that program, so it was funded by kind of foundations, as well as including a couple of kind of reform nonprofits, including in LA, the Advancement Project and the Urban Peace Institute were kind of early part of introducing community safety partnerships and training police to kind of to do this work. After a while, then those programs then became, you know, part of LAPD's budget. They were initially started with donations, but then LAPD has to keep hiring these police to fill them. And this summer, in response, or presented as a response to the uprising, Mayor Garcetti announced that community safety partnerships is going to be expanded from just being this kind of pilot program to a full LAPD bureau, with a bureau chief for that division within the LAPD, and you know, a lot more funding and spreading it out. So so the primer that the work group is putting together, that I was actually, I'm newer to that, so I think Ian, if you want to jump in there, because I just saw it for the first time this weekend, is kind of giving the history, the kind of theoretical history of where community policing comes from, and the problems and the kind of concepts that it relies on of trying to build trust with the community, and this idea of safety through police being embedded in everything that the state is doing.
Yeah, thanks, Shakir. Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think you covered it pretty well. I think it became really hard to not kind of historicize it, and as Hamid said, like, it's in a continual kind of struggle against it, and that they kind of just put a new name on things that they have been doing. Something we kind of have been thinking through for the primer for this kind of is reading this pamphlet and being able to know, oh, they say like trust. We've kind of pulled out themes of trust and then safety, so that people understand how that language has been used by LAPD, so that they can read it and kind of understand and make these connections, right? And so the LAPD in their data informed pamphlet goes over, you know, multiple programs and ways that they're doing that we've said are just kind of rehashing old ones. So it's how can we read these, know what they're doing, but also, you know, the hope is know how to kind of fight against that as well. So it's really hopefully able to kind of distill, you know, the insidious ways that LAPD functions and orders, but also kind of be able to understand how to kind of go against that by reading it and being a part of organizing against it and everything. And I think, yeah, the larger goal would be, you know, place it within a timeline and understand how it fits, but is different too from maybe other community policing, or what about it is something that we could kind of target and go against, or what are the multiple targets of it that we need to advance and go against, because like like Shakir said, it was, if you view it as a counterinsurgent strategy, then we have to understand the multiple targets that we have to fight against that hopefully, we see in the past struggles, but also the current phase of it.
Thank you. Thank you both. Shakir, were you going to add something?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just going to add that, this is also, like I said, the connection and the origins in Joe Biden's time in the Senate. It's something I think to really look out for in our fight and continuing. I mean, Biden has already promised to expand. That's one of his kind of main platform things, is to expand COPS funding and treating that as like the reform and that is a response to kind of criticism of police. Is let's have more police for safe community police. And so we're already seeing that. We obviously already saw even in how Mayor Garcetti is using criticism of police to expand the community policing program as a solution. So yeah, stuff to watch out for.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add to that while the community policing concept and the office was formalized in '94 under the bill that was passed, the idea and the implementation and operationalization is pretty much goes right immediately after the Vietnam War, and even during the Vietnam War as well, late '60s, early '70s, and it took on different iterations of different names as well. And since then, it was very obvious that what was being done in Vietnam and how communities were being policed in the United States, and it really sort of coincides with the civil rights movement and Black liberation movements and a lot of uprisings and that have been going on, where this facade of building trust and relationships in community was really about occupation, really about as occupying armies would go in and kind of like win that hearts and minds. So hearts and minds of a couple of nonprofit, couple of church leaders, and this, that, and the other, but with the idea to have to contain and control. So thank you. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments from somebody else, from the folks? Okay. Please feel free to chime in, because we are also here to recruit you as well, to be a part of the fight. And if it's exciting you, like, and it is, like, so just join the fight. And this is how the coalition builds its knowledge. And it's all about collective research and community-based research and knowledge. So yeah. Next, I'm going to pass it on to location-based for, I don't know, Lauren, were you going to walk us through some of that stuff?
Yeah, or Julia, do you want to? I'm happy to start.
Go ahead, and I have the documents that we made with Ramsha if you want me to share them.
Okay, I mean, I think we can maybe just talk a little bit about it. So our group is looking specifically at kind of the location-based policing aspects of the data-informed community-focused policing handbook. It's a mouthful, but basically, we've kind of identified the ways in which this handbook is a continuation of previous location-based policing programs. So going back to Tiff's presentation about PredPol and laser, this handbook kind of identifies areas like neighborhood engagement areas and crime attractors that are, basically direct correlates to laser zones and the PredPol hotspots. And so that's something that we're kind of looking into. Although in this handbook, they don't identify, the proprietary PredPol algorithm, since LAPD can't use it anymore. We are kind of looking into what they're doing and what they're using to kind of create these neighborhood engagement areas and these hotspots. And so we're trying to understand that. Another big thing in the handbook that they focus on is crime prevention through environmental design, kind of the idea that through kind of you can design out crime through improving the built environment by heightening surveillance capacity and kind of managing who supposedly belongs in certain areas. And so that's something that we're looking into as well, looking at the history of how the LAPD has used crime prevention through environmental design all the way back, since, the 80s and 90s. And so we're kind of trying to trace that genealogy of of these programs. What else are we looking at?
Microgeographic areas. So these are areas, it's basically a renaming of what they used to call hotspots. And so it's the same tactics renamed. So there are these 500 by 1,000 square foot areas that are just really heavily policed. And so as Tiff was talking about earlier, they create suspicion by stopping people and calling them suspicious, and then just keep creating these records for people to target. I mean, as Dylan said last week, Rodriguez, who was with us last week, talking about it's not mass incarceration, it's targeted incarceration. You can hear the police telling on themselves, calling it precision policing, right? So they're targeting specific microgeographic areas or hotspots. They're targeting specific populations. And so they name these areas as the high crime areas, which justifies these random stop and searches and turns anyone in the area into somebody who's suspect and makes it easier for the police to use force, knowing that they'll be protected by a claim of fearing for their life.
Great. Yeah. So our working group is also, like the other working group, working to create a primer or some public ed tools to kind of explain and demonstrate some of the things that LAPD is proposing in this handbook and how, you know, it'll cause harm to the community, particularly communities of color and low income and unhoused folks. The last aspect that our group is looking at are kind of the mapping technologies and the algorithms that are used to create these kind of hotspots. So we're looking at technologies like ArcGIS and CAMs just to kind of uncover their complicity in criminalizing different areas and making areas uninhabitable. So, yep.
Great. Thank you. Lot of information there. We're going to open up, unmute everybody in a few minutes. So please feel free if people want to chime in and have a comment. So I'm gonna now, okay, let's keep on moving. We got about 15 or so more minutes on this piece. We're gonna talk about offender-based policing. So Tiff, it's back to you.
Thanks, Hamid. And you're also in this offender-based policing group. I don't know if you also wanted to say anything on this or not, but I'm also happy to just start if you want.
Please go ahead. I am looking for the slide.
Okay, sorry.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go, Tiff.
All right. And along with Hamid and myself, we also have Vivan doing this work. And Vivan has done some awesome work, which we are not showing just yet, but we're very excited to be talking about soon. Looking at the history of offender-based policing. But so just a little bit about what we are working on together. So these are some of the things, these are some of the questions that we've been talking about so far. Kind of looking at what is the vocabulary, I'm sorry, around offender-based policing, who gets labeled as an offender, how does that happen? What is the process by which folks are categorized or these labels are applied? And then what does that mean? Like, how do folks get treated? What's the outcome of being in one of these categories? And if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so, and we're also talking about more about the groups of folks that historically are being policed and that have been policed, and the way that folks are categorized. And I would love to, we have some of the groups listed here or shown here on the screen. And I'd also love to hear from folks about who else, like who are we not naming here in terms of folks that historically and presently do get profiled and criminalized by police. So looking at some of these, according to the handbook, and previously, of course, we know that folks who have been arrested before, who have been incarcerated, who are on probation, parole, or in post-release community supervision previously and currently, these are folks that are going to continue to be surveilled by police, followed in their areas. So this is something that we're in the process again of learning more about, like what are those specific policing strategies that folks are experiencing, and what are the ways that we can be pushing back on this. Sex workers. This is another group of folks who historically and presently continue to be policed by LAPD. Youth, Black youth, gang members and their associates. Our comrades at Youth Justice Coalition actually have done a lot of extensive work around exposing and ensuring the targeting of folks who are labeled gang members. And actually, due to the work that Youth Justice Coalition was doing, LAPD is no longer able to use and classify folks as gang members in the CalGang database. However, we know that LAPD still continues to label folks as gang members in other ways. They have different databases that they use to kind of track gang members and to apply that label to folks, whether or not it's accurate. Folks who are unhoused, undocumented folks who are disabled or in mental health, having a mental health crisis. I'm sorry, I just saw and I'll pause here and again ask folks if there's other groups that should be listed up here or if there are any comments, and I think we had one in the chat. Yes. Yes, sorry, that was actually a direct message I got in the chat. So yeah, so folks in crisis, what that refers to is the way that that folks who are experiencing a mental health crisis, whether or not it's like through a call to 911 or folks on the street as well, are in crisis, the way that they get policed and the way that they have police violence then put upon them. And Shelley, yes, you're right. Trans folks, gender nonconforming folks are often profiled and criminalized as well. Okay, and then this is the last slide we have. This is something, this again is a work in progress. So this is looking at kind of the landscape of offender-based policing. And actually we shared this and talked about this at our last working group. And we think that actually we're gonna kind of work on this and build it out a bit and possibly also combine it with location-based policing because there's a lot of the same elements. And that's something that I think is gonna be exciting and that we can be sharing with community once that's done. But essentially what we're looking at here is the way we have it laid out is, again, the landscape of offender-based policing. So kind of starting with at the top there, the profiling and targeting stage, which is looking at who is being targeted, how does that happen? And we have different groups there called out. Then from there, you go on to the blue section. This is the data gathering mechanisms, the analysis mechanisms. We have here LAPD's architecture of surveillance and all the different ways that data is kind of pulled in on folks through those technology means. Sarah is, let's see, Sarah stands for scanning, analysis, response, and assessments. That is a means by which police are essentially just like driving through the community, scanning, or S is for scanning, I believe. So scanning the community, and kind of assessing folks and deciding, again, who looks suspicious, who looks criminal, who is being a nuisance, and then deciding how to respond.
Did we lose you there, Tiff?
Mechanisms by which that happens. And then we also have the network communication system. This links to other databases. We have the record management system. So again, all of the like data analysis being analyzed, and then what happens is then that gets put out to the yellow section over here. And this is where kind of the offender-based policing is implemented by these different units. So by patrol, by parole compliance units, by vice, by all of these different LAPD arms. And yeah, again, that's something that we're kind of looking at. So like, what does each of these departments do? And how does that vary based on the specific groups that, that they're focusing on? And again, I'll just pause here for questions or see how many of you have anything to add to that.
No, the only thing I'd like to add is, I mean, just as a way of this language, that we know that everything, you know, just whenever somebody gets murdered by law enforcement, the first thing people must have realized that they heard is it was a gangbanger, okay? And then obviously the whole piece shifts from like, you know, so we also have to look at these programs that there is there's a much more insidious purpose behind this as well. That how in the whole vocabulary that has been developed, how the narrative has been developed, that how the community and community members get demonized. And we've seen, you know, forever, at least over the last 60 years, we can go back, or 50 years, we can go back on the war on drugs and the war on crime, and the various other wars that have been waged. So how this criminalization, the narrative of criminalization is constantly there. So we saw our fight around chronic offenders, now this is offender-based, gang members, and on and on and on. So I think it's really critical that we don't allow them to constantly, you know, just define us. That's basically what they do, and it's again a whole process of you know, even when we talk about the term that was being used, counterinsurgency. You know, you go in, you occupy somebody's country, and people want you to get the fuck out of there because you're an occupying army and destroying their culture and their land and their lives. And then you become the enemy, then you become the insurgent, then you become, so that's exactly how that methodology is used around, particularly we've seen forever, for hundreds of years, around Black and Indigenous communities, that how, you know, the creation of the other and the criminalization of the other happens, and that moves on through policing as of today in 2021. So now we're still talking about offender-based policing, where the underlying theme is that no, that is an offender, that is somebody what looks like that we need to be scared of, and because inherently they are criminal. So regardless of what, so I think it's really important that we need to lift these things and challenge them and debunk them and publicly trash them. So thank you, Tiff. Any questions, any comments? You know, what I'm going to do is to, okay, just please post your comments in chat or anything. And next we're going to go to, so let's see, we gotta just run through this in another 6 minutes or so. The laser zone and anchor point research. So please, I think Julia, you were going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so Tiff and I have been working on focusing on 77th Division and how the effects of Operation Laser on policing and land in particular in 77th, and then also extending into the Crenshaw corridor. So Tiff and I are going to do this together. And Tiff, do you want to take this part?
Sure, yeah. Okay. So, and I hear you, Hamid, that we have about 5-6 minutes to talk about this. So we will just give a little overview of what we've been looking at. Okay. So what we've been looking at is how Operation Laser was being implemented in 77th Division. And specifically what we've been looking at is its use along Crenshaw Corridor. And we've been looking at Crenshaw Corridor specifically, excuse me, because when we got information back from LAPD by filing the PRA and asking for the maps of the laser zones and the anchor points to see where these things were operating in 77th, what we found when we looked at both the laser zones and the anchor points, not only in 77th, but also in Southwest Division, we saw that there were numerous points along Crenshaw Corridor that were being marked as anchor points. Julia, are you actually able to go back?
Yeah.
Sorry, the previous slide.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. So we noticed that there were numerous points along Crenshaw Corridor that were marked as anchor points or laser zones, which meant, again, that LAPD is specifically calling these areas out as being high crime and therefore marking them for increased and intensive policing and surveillance tactics. So in addition to that, we know that Crenshaw is a very, very well-known, very historic Black neighborhood in LA, and it's home to many Black businesses and families and folks that have been there for many years and that have been fighting police violence for many years, as well as gentrification and land development. And folks are still fighting against that today. It's also a route along which Metro has been installing a new line since I think about 2017. And as we know, that's also very much associated with gentrification and the process by which folks are displaced. And then as we see along the side there, that's the list of anchor points that were given to us for 77th Division. Not all of those follow along Crenshaw Corridor, but a number of them do. And I hope it's clear what we're looking at there on the map. It's like a map, and then we also have, so the anchor points are the little boxes, and then the laser zones are the red lines. Okay, next slide, please. So what it means, we're asking, what does it mean when an area is deemed a laser zone? What does it mean at 77th? We're looking at the ways that folks were being policed. And these are some of the things that we've come up with so far. In the interest of time, we will keep it moving along, but essentially, yeah, it means increased policing, increased arrests, profiling, evictions, increased stress and trauma to the community. This next slide, this is an example of a mission sheet that was given to us, or that we got, that we received, of how LAPD would patrol a laser zone. And that was the one at Slauson and Crenshaw. So we're kind of learning a bit more about policing and the impact on the community just by looking at what were police doing in that area. And then if we go to the next slide, thank you, Julia. Something we're also looking at is when we're talking about the impact of police and police occupation, we're also looking at LAPD's reports of officer-involved shootings. So when LAPD shoots at a community member, when they draw on community members, or when they kill a person, we're looking at what was happening, what were the circumstances, what was the area. And on this map, these are some instances of police shootings and police killings that have occurred along Crenshaw Corridor. So these are some of the police violence that we have identified so far. So as you can see on the map, we have a number of folks there. Ronald Boone, Jamar N., who was a youth, so we don't actually have his last name. He was shot at by police when he was on his way to school. Riddell Jones, a Black woman who was killed by police when she was having a mental health crisis at the Crenshaw Mall. Keith Bursey Jr., he was murdered by police. Gilbert Harvey had just gotten out of jail, and he was shot by police and harassed. And Grishario Mack, who was murdered by police again at the Crenshaw Mall. So we are kind of looking at that further and identifying other instances where police have been committing violence against community members in the form of shootings and killings. And now I will pass it on to Julia for the next section.
Yeah, so then what we've done is sort of looked at the area in terms of land development. What's the relationship between real estate owners and the police, and how that is used in, as we said, clearing the way for gentrification. And so looking at, through the PRAs, looking at CNAPs, and CNAP stands for Citywide Nuisance Abatement Program. So some people might be really familiar with it and some people might not. It began in 1997 and it's run by the city attorney's office. And it's a program that began in LA. And according to the LAPD, it targets like the worst abandoned structures and nuisance properties. And they use language like, you know, that plague Los Angeles neighborhoods. And but it's an expansion of a program that began in 1990. So you can see a pattern of how they start a program, expand it, when it's called out as racist, when it's found to be ineffectual or targeting specific communities, they slightly change it and change the name. And so it's an expansion of a program that began in 1990 through a federal grant called Falcon, which was focused attack, linking community organizations and neighborhoods. And so they talk about it again, like the war on drugs, it's these narcotics abatement units. So it's again, targeting drugs, gang, and, you know, criminal activity and nuisance properties. And what we know is that there's drugs in all communities. We know people use drugs in Beverly Hills and the Palisades. We know that you know, that there are police gangs, but we also, again, we see this targeted incarceration. So we've been through, so many people in the organization have done so much great work looking through emails, finding emails from real estate owners directly to the city attorney, people who have actually donated to the city attorney. And so seeing how they work in collaboration to target specific properties that they can then clear out through CNAP. They can demolish buildings. They can require building owners to install CCTVs. They can declare them micro hotspots. So you can see all of these things coming together. And so we're looking at building developments in the neighborhood. So Nipsey Hussle Tower, which was CNAP'd, billionaire Jeff Green's plan to demolish Dorset Village, looking at what's happening with the Crenshaw LAX Metro line and the Crenshaw Mall as well. And then really looking at the community response. There's so much community response and we want to be able to support the response, the people who live in Dorset Village who have been really fighting against that project, demolishing their homes, and the Crenshaw Subway Coalition and Crenshaw Mall. So really wanting to support and uplift those fights and work in collaboration with those communities and organizations and find as much information as we can to make clear what's happening. And so our continued research is, here's what we're continuing to work on and what you can help with. So, and you don't have to know anything. You don't have to know how to research anything. I'm really learning how to do the research. I'm at the very, very beginning stages of really looking into PRAs and figuring out, okay, how do you go through them? What are we looking for? And so if you want to join in, it's, you don't have to know how to do anything ahead of time. And I think so much of this can seem really overwhelming to people. And this actually, I would say doing the research and joining in the work, in the small group work, is really a way to actually make it less overwhelming and find out in little bits what the police are doing and how they're doing it. And so I think it's really an antidote to some of the overwhelm that people feel when they look at these big these big projects, these big, you know, the data informed community focused policing, there's so many aspects to it, but it's a really great way to find out. And you can also think of it as like a mystery to solve, if that helps. So we're looking at, you know, real estate purchases and people, land and building developments that are going on, and these case studies that are really interesting things to find out more about. So you're welcome to join on in, and we can help you out if you're feeling skittish about it at all.
Thank you both, Julia and Tiff, and thank you for the whole team, and thank you to Lauren for shepherding this whole process as co-lead on the data-driven working group meeting. And just to let folks know, if you want to be a part of this research and developing this narrative and understanding and doing the deep dive, please send us an email, because the location-based policing, land and policing folks meet at on first Monday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. And then the data-driven folks, where we look into more of the architectural surveillance and all that, they meet at on the third Monday of the month from 6 to 8 p.m. So send us an email at stoplapdspying@gmail.com if you're interested, because this is all a work. This is a collective community work. This is not, we're not, you know, folks are not paid researchers or organizers and all of that. Just as Julia said, it's all about us. It's about our families. It's about our communities. It's about our neighbors who are being targeted. So, and yes, please send a message to Lauren, absolutely, Lauren has been leading this group as well. So with that, I want to bring in our partners, Free Radicals, just to kind of walk us through, and I did a quick snapshot, as you know, we've been working together on this defund surveillance, and we've been putting together some demands as well, and looking at some next steps and next actions as well. So I am going to pass it on to Vivian from Free Radicals, who's going to just walk us through the draft, and we would love to have your feedback, and because it's going to be, we're all going to have to push them together and be responsible for that.
Hi guys, I'm Vivian from Free Rads. So give me a minute to share my screen. Y'all can see my screen, right? Cool. So just a quick rundown. This is kind of a demand campaign outline that we did with that Free Rads and Stop LAPD Spying Coalition did. So I'm just really just going to go do a high level overview of some of the points that we focused on. And if you guys have any comments or concerns, feel free to just leave it in the chat. And I think Hamid or Shakir would probably let me know. So one part of our one demand that we have for the defund campaign is defunding and disarming the LAPD of all weapons of surveillance. So basically that would consist of facial recognition software, or dash cams, or drones, or precision policing algorithms. Mostly because these surveillance kind of promote a stalker state with LAPD, and really just aggravate the situation that Black, low income, or unhoused, disabled, or queer and trans communities go through, rather than helping, is what they claim. So the second is that all non-LAPD city departments terminate contracts with LAPD. So what the reason for this demand is that a lot of non-LAPD city departments will hire LAPD to come over to their spaces and police, and really that's kind of unnecessary, because it's we really shouldn't be focusing on that, on hiring by expanding police into these infrastructures. Rather, we should be cutting that and really investing that money and improving the spaces there, rather than inviting police in. The third one would be ending all federal spending towards LAPD. And really this is more emphasizing on how LAPD would get free military gear from the US military, or learn military tactics, and then later use that in the LA community, which is not really what we want, because, you know, why are we using military tactics against civilians to begin with? And the next is abolish community safety partnerships. So really, these would include like neighborhood watch teams and whatnot. And really, we want to abolish this just for the sake, just because of this kind of promotes of like the good cop narrative, when in reality there really is no such thing as a good cop. Like, this is just once again promoting that stalker state idea and really just inviting police into our homes, which we don't want. The fifth is abolishing LAPD's propaganda divisions. So really, the whole point of this is to abolish the group that's been responsible for deceiving the public about police harm, as well as the character assassination of both victims and critics of LAPD violence. So the sixth is abolishing LAPD's fraudulent oversight body. Of course, we've all heard of the bullshit that the LAPD commission likes to do. For instance, every time we would criticize them or, or like bring up concerns, most of the time they're like in one year and out the other, and just to prove it anyway. So it's like, what's the point? Why are we even giving these guys monies when they're not really doing their job and holding LAPD accountable? And the seventh would be tech companies and academic institutions and their collaborations or complicity with LAPD. So really, this is just how where tech companies and academics institutions are making a profit off of the police violence that Black and low-income community and queer communities face. For instance, like one example would be how companies would make statements of racial justice, while on the other hand, they're like making billions of dollars from the LAPD and other technologies that they have designed and developed and have handed it off to LAPD. So that's pretty much the list of demands that we have made so far. Are there any comments or concerns?
I just want to also invite some of the other folks who were helping in drafting this thing, whether they have a comment, either Sophie or Alexis or Akhil and some of the other folks as well. Let me just go ahead and open up their mics. Sophie or Alexis, do you have any other thoughts, any comments?
Yeah, thanks for that, Vivian. So I think one thing that we have in the background that I think is really important to us is we say defund is not an end goal, but a long-term strategy for abolition. So, we have these demands and we know that this is just kind of like an interim point that, this is what we are kind of starting with, to defund as a means to kind of reduce the size and scoping of policing surveillance on the stalker state, knowing that this is going to be, a longer term fight to abolish the police. So I think that part is really important to how we're approaching this campaign and like our values as abolitionists. I don't know if Shakir or Hamid, you want to add to that?
Shakir, you have any other comments?
No, I think, yeah, no, I and I just want to also maybe add that like these demands we kind of developed them after, like, for the last several months, we've been working to kind of research LAPD's budget and to like dissect the past several years of the budget, and then also to try to oppose this year's budget increases. So, these are just ideas for some of the things that would be good places to begin kind of dismantling some of the harm that the police, the harm of LAPD. But yeah, like Alexa said, it's on a it's a strategy towards abolition. Maybe one more thing to emphasize is that we're putting out these demands and trying to kind of propose where the cuts should be in response to the police commission a couple of months ago shared with the public this this survey that had been conducted by this group, institute at Loyola Marymount that reported that majority of Angelenos who were surveyed for it support some form of cuts to the LAPD. Something I think it was, I'm really bad with numbers, so I think it was over half supported diverting LAPD funding and putting it in other agencies that provide services and or just providing resources to the community. And something like 30 or 40% say they support completely dismantling LAPD. So, you know, that's kind of where the community consensus and demands are in LAPD's own proposal, own surveys of the community. Yet the police are asking for $106 million budget increase this year. So we're trying to respond that these are the things that they need to cut now as on the path to shrinking the LAPD budget overall, which currently takes over half the city's general funding. So, you know, half of the money that the city has is spent on policing, could be spent on so many other things.
So we've opened up an option. People can unmute themselves if folks have any thoughts. So maybe just going through these. So the first demand is to defund and disarm LAPD of all weapons of surveillance. Anybody has any thoughts or comments about that? Yay, nay? Keep them, add more. Second one is the all non-LAPD city departments terminate contracts with LAPD. And this is, you know, as it's been stated, MTA, bus service, library service, homelessness. And so any thoughts on that? Because that's how a whole lot of criminalization continues to take place, and these become sites for, you know, more and more criminalizing of the community as well. Third one is, again, end all federal spending towards the LAPD. There's a whole lot of money, and while we were talking about a $3.2 billion budget, there's hundreds of millions of dollars that comes through to LAPD through the Urban Area Security Initiative and various other Bureau of Justice Assistance and various other programs. So our demand is to completely cut that too. And the fourth demand is to abolish community safety partnerships. And now again, this is what we discussed earlier in the webinar and the conversation as well. This is a newly developed bureau, but the program has been going on officially and formally since 2010. And is expanding, and it's very much rooted in the military style occupation, very much rooted in sort of, you know, identifying folks who are in, like, maybe just those hearts and minds with about 1% to control the rest of the 99%. So we absolutely want that demolished as well, because in a sense, they started off in public housing projects. So rather than investing money directly into the lives of the community, into their health and well-being, the lives are being policed. So again, that heavy hand of the police is always present. Number 5 is the abolish LAPD's propaganda division. And you know, this is a pretty heavily staffed organization, and and a lot of it is brought together. We were talking about earlier about offender-based policing and the gang narrative, and a lot of these things are this propaganda that these communication departments at LAPD you know, just spread, and a whole lot of misinformation, lies, just write out lies. I mean, you know, earlier Shakir was talking about facial recognition technology. So their spokesperson when this thing was exposed at LA Times said in 2019 or 2020 actually, in September 2020, said that no, LAPD doesn't use any facial recognition technology. Now that's their official spokesperson, but you know, spreading a whole lot of lies and misinformation as well. And the 6th one is, and the last couple ones, to abolish LAPD's fraudulent oversight body. We saw, it's never a Tuesday goes by where they don't, it's a pass-through, where it's a rubber stamp body, whether it's drones or facial recognition technology, or kind of just like, completely providing all kind of cover. They act more like a board of a corporation, which is garbage, because this is not a corporation. This is out of public dollars and public monies. So their primary role is the protection of the cops, and they no way that they represent the community at all and the health and well-being of the community. And of course, the tech companies and academic institutions are seventh demand about how they have been deep in promoting and advancing the state violence by creating intellectual frameworks and creating material support, in a sense, for the LAPD as well, whether it's Microsoft or Amazon or any of the other companies. So this remains a work in progress. If folks have any response, please just put them in chat, and I'm just going to open it up for a few minutes. So any comments from anybody? Any thoughts? You can unmute yourself. Cool. So okay, so the question is, would defunding the PCG means the press cannot go behind the lines of a crime scene? What was PCG? I didn't quite understand what PCG was.
No, I mean, obviously, like the media could still interact with LAPD, and would also be able to, in public, do what they need to do to report. But what these units are, I mean, even if they're kind of presented as just media relations or media communications, is that they are just affirmatively putting out misinformation and specifically kind of pushing their narrative, their public relations for the police more than anything. So yeah, I mean, I think, the media could still play its role, but we don't need for LAPD to have a vast staff of public relations people whose job it is just to kind of spin and deceive.
Vivian, Alexis, do you have any other thoughts?
For me, I would just want to point out that the reason we decided to go very specific with these demands letter is just that, like, sometimes when we do make a demand to LAPD, they'll like pull up like some bullshit reason why they didn't go through it. For instance, like for the defund cut, when they did go through a cut, it was like the most they did was like cut overtime, and then that was it. And it was just like, that doesn't make it much of a difference. Like, so it's like by listing it out, we can kind of get like a good idea of like how specifically of how should we have like which programs the money should be going towards to and which they shouldn't be.
Cool. And I just want to let folks know that this is very much, as an extension of, what our partners at BLM and others at the People's Budget have been working on, and kind of just developing a whole bunch of things. So we have been working specifically around surveillance. So these are also this draft. We wanted to bring it to this conversation, then going to share it with our comrades at BLM and People's Budget and other spaces as well. So we have a much more broader push for these things and support for these things, and we keep on building that power. So excellent. And the group that develops them meets every Sunday at 4 o'clock, which is a budget group. So please feel free to hit us up and definitely be a part of this conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, Alexis. All right. So now, the last piece that we wanted to do was to go through our zine that we have developed. So this was something that grassroots principle. Let me just quickly pull this thing up. So if folks can, I'm going to post this. link in chat, so if folks have a chance to open it up, then I'll just quickly go through that. I know that our partner and core group member, coordinating team member, Jojo, and Baby Anarchist, who have developed the zine. I don't know if they're on or not. I don't think so. But if folks can look at this document, the link that I just posted, this was a grassroots principles that were developed about little over 4 years ago, in collaboration with a bunch of different organizations and individuals when we used to meet at the UCLA Labor Center. And these are about 4 years old. We've had previous ones that, so of course, constantly up for review and see where we are, whether we're staying up to speed and our values or we are living up to our values and principles or not. So in a sense, what we did was that now, how do we popularize them? How do we mainstream them? How do we bring it out to the communities? So what we thought, we've developed a zine out of that, and I am going to then let me just open it up. There we go. Okay. So this is the zine that Baby Anarchist has created, that we're going to be using for community outreach and letting folks know. So this is okay, this was the cover. Now, because of technology, my apologies, I'm not able to go back each time and do that directly. So this is what the first one, when you look at it. So of course we honoring Asada, and Asada's instructions to us, basically as a guide to us, and that what is our role, what is our duty. And then this one, the grassroots community self-defense. So maybe if people can unmute and just somebody can read. Each one of us can read it loudly so we can hear ourselves. So please take a chance to unmute and participate. Who wants to go first?
Wait, I think see the cover, right?
I'm sorry?
We can't see the other pages after that first page.
Oh, shoot. Okay, sorry for that. This is my bad. Okay. How about this? Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Whoever wants to read it. And we got 12 minutes to do it.
I can do it.
Go ahead.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Grassroots community self-defense is a labor of love. It means a group of individuals and organizations coming together to protect the life-affirming rights and needs of our communities. We join in struggle to resist, organize, and defend against the national security police state and state-sanctioned violence, and to advance the following principles grounded in our collective liberation.
Thank you, Julia. Let me go to the next one, and my apologies because I have to do it one by one. That's my lack of techno expertise. There you go. Whoever wants to take a shot at it.
Power is within our communities. We affirm that power is within community and not with state and federal governments or profit-driven and warmongering corporations. We build power by being clear in our demands that instruments of state violence be abolished, not just reformed or refined. We commit to the abolition of all state interventions that prevent our full autonomy and liberation. An injury to one is an injury to all. We shall not tolerate any abuse, oppression, repression, or violations of the human rights of any member of our community. We must fight together with marginalized communities to abolish all systems of oppression.
You come for one, you come for all. Okay, next one. All right. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. Fundamental needs and rights. From the land to the people, every being has fundamental needs and rights. We honor the sacredness of life when we fight to ensure everyone's basic necessities are met, including healthy food, clean water, housing, clothing, education, healthcare, dignity, safety, movement, expression. Our struggles are interconnected. We collectively recognize that movements centered around race, class, gender, sexuality, nation, and disability are inseparable and intertwined, i.e., struggles against racism in the US are inherently connected to liberation movements around the world, such as the Zionist apartheid and genocide of the Palestinian people.
Thank you very much. Someone else.
I can go.
Please.
Commitment to Black liberation. We must confront our personal and our community's anti-Blackness in the fight for Black liberation. It says, love is calling out anti-Black behavior in oneself and the community. Commitment to trans, femme, gender nonconforming, and LGBTIQ liberation. We must confront our personal and our community's homophobia, transphobia, anti-LGBTIQ sentiments, and hateful and harmful policies.
Thank you. There's about 3 more. And who next?
Give it a shot. Commitment to land recognition that everyone in LA area lives in Tongva/Gabrielino and Chumash lands. We are migrants, refugees, diasporic, displaced, and enslaved peoples. We respect, acknowledge, and join the fight by Native peoples to preserve their land and its resources in so-called Los Angeles and beyond. And the caption says, "This is stolen Native land." Commitment to support and fund community defense and building a culture of resistance. We will engage in collective learning with our communities about the state apparatus for surveillance, criminalization, and counterinsurgency. We will resist and support non-compliance with laws, policies, procedures, and actions that violate our community's right to live dignified lives, such as any registries based on race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, or religion, invasions of privacy, and/or searches or seizures, any and all deportations, detentions, and incarceration. And it says ACAB beneath that.
All right. Thank you. Next one. Okay. Someone else?
I can do this one. Hold nonprofit groups accountable. We shall call on our communities to hold nonprofit groups, foundations, social justice, and community-based organizations accountable for any collaboration with the state, which takes power away from our communities, keeps trying to reform a system that will harm our people, as it was always intended to do. And then organize to resist and defeat fascism, colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, and genocide. We are committed to organizing from a perspective that understands the systemic oppression our communities face.
Thank you. Okay, who next?
I'll go. Commitment to internal struggle and transparency. We shall strive on an ongoing basis to identify any contradictions within the various collaborating groups / peoples which both protect people from harm and use transformative and restorative justice to resolve conflict. We shall strive towards centering survivors and resolving interpersonal and communal violence as it happens. We remain committed to unlearning and sharing lessons learned. Commitment to assess our language. We shall build power within our movement and communities by assessing and evaluating our language and challenging messages that seek to harm. We refuse to use state tactics we've been taught throughout our lives and work to unlearn what we were conditioned to accept.
Thank you. On the very last page is coming up.
I can do it. Anybody else?
Please.
All right. Operational unity among collaborating groups. We are committed to working together and creating affinity groups that share our principles and concerns to create a common front in defending our communities.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating. And I know that, if there's if you notice something or first of all, just want to open it up for, let's say we're about 10 more minutes. If any feedback, any thoughts about the way these principles flow. Do they capture the broader essence of our imagination? Not just our day-to-day work, but our imagination, our liberation, how we think of abolition, and provide as a guide as well as a roadmap. Anything missing? Because we can have values and principles on paper as much as we want to, but it's really the bigger challenge is that how are we living up to that, both and it's both on a personal level and on a collective level. There's so much conversations about abolition and liberation. I mean, these are all our personal and collective journeys, and I think just as speaking on a personal level, that's been a journey of a whole lot of unlearning as as product of patriarchy and male privilege, and just there's a whole lot moving. So it is a constant, and feeling challenged is very healthy. Absolutely, we should be feeling challenged. Okay. Well, anybody disagrees with any of that? Cool. Okay, well, thank you for participating, and thank you for opening yourself up to participate and share and speak out, and so we can hear each other as they're listed. So yeah. Well, with that, just what we're going to be doing is that they would be, I think, we'll do a last look around any typos or anything like that. They're going to be going on the website, and then our goal is to really put this out into the social media on our website, and just to let it roll. And these are by no means the possession or the claim of Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. They were developed collectively for all of us collectively. And one of the things that what really led to also, and this was a very interesting conversation that we all had, because as an organization that is engaging around surveillance, spying, and infiltration, people have always asked us, like, talked about digital defense and this, that, and the other. And for us, we've never used any encrypted language. We don't even use any, just these email PGPs or keys or things like that. We still use Gmail, we still use Google Docs, and people have talked to us and looked at us like, that, hey, this is something, why are you doing that? But I think for us, it was really crucial that we don't close it for our communities. You know, we have to make it as accessible as possible. And even if it has to be down to a paper and pencil, then that will be our priority. We're not going to make it limited. We're not going to make it suffocating. We're not going to make it technically challenging. I mean, you saw myself being technically challenged right now, going back and forth with that. So we want to make it really rooted in the community. So what came out of that conversation was that more than any other defense, it's our values that is our best defense. It's our principles that is our best defense. Because if we are living up to those values, if we are living up to those principles, then hey, you know, when we walk in power. When we walk in collective power. Because when we say that, no, we want you abolished, and we say that directly, it's not something that, you know, we are cowering behind something or some argument or trying to intellectualize it. It's a very clear piece that this is how violence is happening. This is how the state and the rest of the apparatus moves. So it is for all of us to own, and it's for all of us to share, and it's all for us to live up to. So. Any last thoughts? Well, cool. Well, thank you all very much. This was a very active meeting, and we just thank you to everybody who shared. Thank you to Free Radicals, our comrades, and Baby Anarchist, and Tiff, and Julia, and Shakir, and Lauren, and other folks who shared. You know, just want to just make sure that you know, this space is always open. The space is always there. So our next Tuesday, we have our meeting, and which is going to be on gender and sexuality and how the police state intersects with that. And our comrades, both Chela Coleman and Mariela Saba, are going to be leading that conversation. So join us next Tuesday, same time, 6 o'clock, and look out for the Zoom information and everything else. So in the meantime, just please be healthy and safe, and we look forward to seeing you all out there. Have a good night. Thank you very much.
Good night.